Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Marketing and Development, Beautiful Together. My name is Marissa Shadburn. I'm the Field Education Coordinator here at Americans for the Arts, and we've got a great program planned today, and I'm excited to introduce our speaker, but first I have some quick reminders. ArtsU is our e-learning platform offering a variety of training options to support your work in the field. You can visit artsu.americansforthearts.org to view upcoming events. There will be time for questions at the end of the presentation. You can type your questions in the chat box or unmute yourself by clicking the phone or microphone button on the lower left-hand corner of your screen. The PowerPoint will be made available after today's presentation. You can find it on the Resources tab of the event page. Finally, please note that this presentation is being recorded and the recording will be available in about 24 hours. You can use the link for today's webinar to access the recording. And with that, I am very pleased to introduce our speaker today. Amy Fior is a Vice President for Jeffrey Sobel Consulting, specializing in board and staff training and retreats, strategic planning, project management, and particularly enjoys helping clients in the arts, youth development, education, and social services sectors with atypical income streams through new programmatic initiatives. Amy is also currently serving as the Director of Development for the Story Pirates. Previously, Amy has worked with other arts organizations like Only Make Believe, Tada Youth Theater, the Vineyard Theater, the Public Theater, and MCC Theater. In addition to her work in nonprofit arts administration, Amy was an adjunct professor and at the New York University School of Continuing and Professional Studies and has been a guest lecturer at NYU, Baruch College, and with the Arts and Business Council of New York, among others. She is the founder and director of Play Theater in Union County, New Jersey, and currently teaches classes and directs musicals with children there. Amy resides in Scotch Plains, New Jersey with her husband and 2 daughters. And it's my great pleasure to turn it over to Amy. Thank you so much for joining us today.
It is my pleasure to be here. I am hoping that neither of those 2 daughters will ignore the note on the door that they won't walk in as they get home from school today. But they have been warned. If not, you may see some cute little faces behind me. Thank you so much for joining the webinar today. I'm excited about this topic. First, I'd love to know, and since it's a small group and we can communicate via Zoom actually by speaking to one another, I'm curious, does anyone want to tell me your position with an organization and how many people are on your staff and serve in marketing and development roles? Anyone want to volunteer that, or you can put it in the chat box if that's easier. Feel free to unmute yourself if you're talking. All right, well, so I'll make an assumption that I know that one person has written that they're an executive director. You have 1 staff member, no dedicated marketing or development staff, which then I think means that you are your marketing and development staff. That's typically the way it goes. And I see that Barbara has 3 people in marketing and 2 in development, so a larger organization. Lane or Laney, what type of organization are you with? Something related to a festival as I'm reading your chats. And then I think we have somebody else joining us. Oh, the Vancouver International Film Festival. So today, we're going to be talking about, thank you all for sharing. We're going to be talking about how marketing and development officers can best work together to propel the mission and programming for an arts organization. Now, the couple examples that we got of who is in the room with us today are very different, but the interesting thing is I don't think it actually makes a difference. And what we're going to be talking about today is how these 2 functions can work together, whether it is a group of people that are coming together who typically work separately, or if it's one person who's trying to use separate sides of their brains. So we'll start with some basic definitions that I don't imagine will be surprise to any of you. So, of course, earned income is any dollar given to your company for which you provide goods and services. Typically, this is the responsibility of the marketing department. It includes tickets, subscriptions, merchandise, etc. And of course, unearned income is money that comes to the organization as a donation for which you provide no goods and services in exchange. Typically, this is the responsibility of the development department. And certainly any development officer will tell you that this is their absolute favorite misnomer, because they often have to put forth a great deal of effort in order to earn every dollar they receive. Now, arts management is the business of making art available to the public. It includes creating and executing that art. It includes funding it. It includes promoting it, and it includes explaining what that art is. Now, the responsibility for 3 out of the 4 of those things is very clear, typically. The artistic department creates and executes the art. The development department deals with funding it. The marketing department promotes it. But it's that last point here, explaining what the art is where those responsible parties either come together nicely or sometimes collide. And I always like to, I like to use cartoon character quotes because I find that often the cartoons know what we're thinking better than the rest of us. If you don't know where you're going, it doesn't matter which way you go. Where you are going starts, of course, with your mission statement, right? And we all believe that. We're working in nonprofit. And so we believe that where you are going as an arts organization starts with your mission statement, but we also know that sometimes that's not entirely true. I'm curious, in the chat box, tell me, does your mission statement, your organization, clearly explain what your art is? Ah, I love it. Didn't even hesitate. I get nope with an exclamation point. And as you're thinking about the answer to that question, I'm curious, does everyone involved in your organization agree with your answer to that question? So that question of, does your mission statement clearly explain what your art is? Does everyone involved in your organization agree? Can they, as stakeholders, that, you know, whether that's your staff, your board members, your advisory committee, your volunteers, can they also clearly state and describe what your mission statement is? I'm curious. We had another response of yes, 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 which means, Barbara, you're doing great. I still may have some ideas for you. And Katie is saying to everyone, nope, there is not clear consensus. And also still no. Okay, so you know, it's not surprise, it's, you know, this isn't news that your organization should have a clear and simple mission statement that specifically reflects the vision of the organization, but one that is general enough to allow the organization to grow and for the art to be innovative. Mission statements, more often than not, don't always really live that way. It's quite often that it's not the case that your mission statement is doing exactly what you want for the organization. And sometimes even when the mission statement is doing that, not everyone is able to clearly state what the mission of the organization is, even though they have it at their fingertips to be able to rattle off to somebody. And quite often, discrepancies between the development and marketing messaging often start when the mission statement is really wide and the purpose of the organization is relatively vague. So, without naming any names or accusing the innocent here or the guilty, I'm going to use an example of a mission statement for one organization that I worked for. I'm going to call them Theater X. It started with, we are a nonprofit theater company dedicated to new work, bold programming, and the support of artists. One of America's preeminent centers for the creation of new plays and musicals, Theater X, has consistently premiered provocative, groundbreaking works by both new and established writers. It sounds good, right? You put that onto a grant proposal, you put it onto the homepage of your website. It sounds pretty good. But if you are looking at it even a little bit, you poke it just a tiny bit, the question comes up of, do you immediately know what company this is by reading this mission statement? Can you even narrow down what company it is? Curious if anyone has any answers to that. It was on my list on my resume that Marissa so generously shared with all of you. And some of you aren't from New York, so you may not be as familiar with it. I'm not going to tell you which one it is anyway, because I'm not saying the nicest things about them. In truth and in action, Theater X did plays that the artistic director loved and believed passionately in, regardless of the look or feel of the show. Now, the artistic director had phenomenal taste and presented brilliant work, but there was no through line for how he chose shows. And I found that I found and continue to find, by being a fan of the theater, by working with a lot of different arts organizations, that this is not at all uncommon. So for both the marketing and the development departments, the challenge that came out of that was it was hard to define who we are in our materials to our audiences and in our materials to our funders, other than by listing our body of work, which was eclectic and wide-ranging. There was no feeling of that is a Theater X show, or that is what Theater X does. I recognize that because so much of what we did could have easily been done at 15 other theaters in Manhattan. So when asked to seek audiences as a marketing officer or to seek funders as a development officer, the marketing department would instead just regularly claim our most commercial hits. And the development department would claim our ancillary programs and community outreach, and neither would really describe the productions or the core programs that the artistic director would say that he was actually the most proud of. Rather, they were the shows that the general public and the press liked best, and programs that the donors most easily funded. And as a result, they became what the company was best known for. And unless there was a logo on it, the marketing and development department's pieces really had no continuity between one and the other. So does it matter that there wasn't continuity? I'm curious, do we think it matters? Does it sometimes work where there isn't a continuity and you're talking to a funder and saying, this is who we are, we're serving this community and it's valuable in and of itself, and what the rest of what we just do doesn't matter at all? Katie, I agree with you completely. It would certainly be better to have continuity in all of our communication. So here's my answer to this. Again, my cartoon characters speaking words of wisdom. I'm not going to sing it. I could, but I'm not going to. If just one person believes in you, deep enough and strong enough believes in you, hard enough and long enough before you knew it, someone else would think, if he can do it, I can do it. Whether you are asking for a ticket purchase, a visit to your organization, an annual contribution, or a foundation gift, you are always, every single time, starting by communicating with just one person who needs an understanding of your organization as a whole. And this is where your marketing and development staff can begin to join forces and push leadership together, or if you are the leader of your organization, can get your staff to work together or your stakeholders to work together to create a value proposition. I was looking for a good definition of a value proposition, and I was surprised by the one that I chose, but I actually thought it was a good one that I found on GuideStar, because value propositions are used for for-profit corporations all the time as well. But the value proposition description here is that most people are familiar with, even if they are unsure exactly of what a value proposition is. A value proposition is a short description of what a company provides for its customers in exchange for their financial support. So if you've ever purchased a product, paid for a service, donated to a nonprofit, you likely did so because you accepted, perhaps subconsciously, its value proposition. And on the slides, there's a link to the rest of that article, which is an interesting way of putting together a value proposition, sort of more geared towards social service organizations, but definitely worth a read. To work most effectively, both together and separately, marketing and development staff need a consensus on the value proposition of the organization, especially if the mission statement is not terribly clear. This is what goes into the About Us section of your website. It's referenced in the tagline when you sell memberships. It's the elevator speech that everyone from board members to front of house staff should be able to give when they're talking about your company. It should be also concise enough to easily type into a chat box. So I invite you, as we're talking about these, if you have a value proposition or you think that you can try to put one together, try to put it in the chat box for me here. I'm curious what some of the value propositions are for your organizations. As you're typing or thinking about how you might write out your value proposition, I ask the same frame of a question as I did with your mission statement. Not only is this the value proposition that you would use to describe your organization or maybe the people that you work most closely with, would others write the same value proposition as you? Is your organization seen in the same way that you are seeing your own organization or you intend for your organization to be seen? Can I have a brave volunteer to give me an answer on this one? A value proposition or what you think your value proposition might be for your organization? All right, we'll give you guys a little bit more time to think about that one. Why is this important? I used to be a huge fan of a theater company many years ago. They were doing edgy work. It was really unlike anywhere else that I had been to. They had this just sort of ridiculously cool vibe. And when you went to see a show, the marketing materials encouraged you to come early, to grab a drink, bring it back to your seat. And then after the show, the whole crowd just stuck around and kept drinking and hanging out with the artists in the lobby. And you got to know them. You got to know the actors. You got to know the stage manager. And you just have this amazing artistic experience that didn't begin and end when the lights went down. It was organic, and it just felt amazing and remarkably rare. So I saw a number of shows with this organization, and after seeing them, I received, the annual appeal season came around, and I received a letter in the mail asking for a contribution. The letter was 2 pages long, asking for a contribution. And this is a while ago. This is before we were directing all contributions onto websites. So to be fair, it had, a donor form at the bottom of the second page. It was addressed to Dear Mrs. Fiore. And I don't know about the rest of you. Nobody calls me Mrs. anything unless they're my dry cleaner. So to me, I got this, and it was just painfully formal. It lacked literally everything I loved about this company. Had they asked me, called me on the phone, said, "Hey, Amy, so glad you came to see the show. I loved having this conversation with you. We're curious. Would you be willing to donate $25, $50, $100 to keep the drinks and the conversation flowing?" I didn't have that kind of money at the time, but I think I would have done it because it was what I valued about them so very much. It was so unique and it was so special for them. But instead, I actually saved the letter, and I actually have it at my desk over here. For years, I've saved the letter and put it in my bad examples file. I have one of those because what I loved about the company, which I, as an audience member, could so clearly and easily describe, was not why they were asking me to become a donor. And so it became so clear, and this is easily 15 years ago, when I started writing notes for this presentation that I give, because it was so clear that the two departments were not working together. And I, went back to work that Monday, and when I was still focused, exclusively on marketing, and talked to my development department to say, what do we do? How do we solve this? How do we make sure that we're not working at odds with each other? We're not working for different organizations with similar business cards. I'm going to jump over to, oh, you guys are awesome. Thank you for giving me some stuff in the chat box. I'm going to read them out loud. So Seattle Pro Musica is committing to artistry excellence, community integrity, and providing equal access to a full and vibrant creative life. Katie, on that, would everyone say the same thing? I'll let you answer that while I, oh, we got a new message. You hope so. Me too. I understand the feeling. Barbara is saying we have a set of core values, a mission and a vision and a purpose. And you think everyone's on the same page with those, Barbara? I hope. Lane, and forgive me if I'm mispronouncing if it's Laney or Lane. Your organization is a vision statement, but not a value statement. They're relatively similar. You know, if this is working for your organization, that is typically, you know, that's typically enough. There's lots of organizations that don't, that just sort of have these mission statements that are, I'm going to save the world one play at a time kind of thing, where there's no specificity in it. Yours is we produce screenings, talks, and events as a catalyst for a diverse community to discover, discuss, and share the creativity and craft of storytelling on screen. That's beautiful. That is fantastic. And seems like one that everyone can, that both internally and externally, that everyone can really sort of grasp onto and understand. So when, so first you have to recognize that you need, first you have to decide that you need a value proposition and determine whether or not you have one that's working for your organization, whether it's a vision statement or a value proposition. The first thing to recognize about this is that you need buy-in from all stakeholders. It's a great exercise, regardless, for marketing and development staff to sit down, work together, and make sure there is some common thread between what they're putting out there. But it's so much more useful if you have everyone on board with it. If you're going to do the work and your board president's spouse says, nope, this is not how I see the organization, this is not how we should describe it, it ends up being a waste of time, unfortunately. So I recommend finding a way by meeting, even by survey, ideally by a board and staff retreat, though I can feel you groaning through my screen because nobody wants to sit through those, to get a consensus going on the following. So, how do you want your organization to be seen? Interesting question. It's not just how do you see your organization. It's not just how you think your organization is being seen. How do you want to be seen? Which is really specific in terms of that. What problem does your organization solve and how? Now, when your organization, and maybe you were around for this, and maybe you weren't, when they set up the mission statement, you know, your mission statement is part of your application to be a nonprofit organization, right? So you are committing as an organization to serve your community, to solve a societal problem in some way. So sometimes we as arts organizations see this question and think, we don't, that's not what we do. We do concerts, and that's not, we bring joy through music, but we're not really solving a problem necessarily. I encourage you to try to flip that and try to make sense of that, because first of all, everyone who becomes a donor to your organization, everyone likes to become a hero. It also helps from a marketing perspective if someone who is introduced, and we'll talk a little bit more about this later, if they're introduced to your organization, also understanding that you are not just selling them a ticket to a concert, but you are also solving a problem as well. And so maybe that's about, you know, lack of music education in schools, or you are, you know, the ticket prices for screenings in your area are too expensive, and it's only appealing to a certain audience, etc. And then in order of importance to your target audience, and of course you need to go through the process of knowing who your target audience is. If you haven't done that, that's very important to do. What are the top 3 benefits and features that you offer? I think it's important to not just make that about the art that you're presenting. Sometimes it is about the price. Sometimes the benefits and features are the fact that you are by a subway station. Sometimes it's the fact that you offer things at a different time than other companies. You offer a lunchtime series that, you know, that parents can go to during their busy workday rather than trying to find time on a weeknight, things like that. Couple others on this that you should think through. Now, as nonprofit arts organizations, we are not always as good about thinking about our competitors. Depending on the city you're in, you may not have very many competitors. In Manhattan, there's lots and lots of competition, but we learned, most of us in sort of the smaller regional New York City, resident theater companies, sorry, not regional, resident theater companies, we learned it's just better to work together because, we're only presenting 3 or 4 shows a year. And if we all work together, then it gets everyone to, just build a habit of going to the theater. But part of understanding what your benefits and features are is, if that's challenging for you, is understanding what your competitors are doing and what you're competing for and what you have to offer that's different. It's another way to sort of look at that. And then comparing your outstanding strengths and how they compare with yours, theirs. So you want to identify a group of individuals who have different relationships with your company to poll with these questions. Give the marketing, the development department, the artistic department, the education department, even the finance and the front of house department, all of those staffs equal input and space to explore the answers to this, even if they're going to be ranked by importance later. Part of what we're ultimately going to get to in talking about this is really having buy-in from everyone, from the very top of the organization to the people who are the very front of your organization, having buy-in on what the organization is. And sometimes it's surprising what you can learn from an usher. And because they're the ones that are often face of your organization, right? If you're having trouble finding consensus, if you initially interview that group of people or you survey or retreat with that group of people and it's all over the map, try making your group even wider by including a new intern or a volunteer, a seasoned staff member who left the company a few years ago, but who knows the company inside and out. A single ticket buyer who came for the first time, or a former board member who was with the organization for a while and has now gotten some distance from it. Their answers may also inform the way you are perceived. So then with feedback, you then go back to a smaller group because it's very hard to do this by an enormous committee. With feedback from organizational leaders and board, you want to then refine that value proposition and let it then guide your branding and marketing initiatives. I'm going to stop there on value propositions, so I think you have a sense of how that works. Does anyone have any questions on this? I love what Barbara wrote here. We discuss your values at every staff meeting every other week. We all keep a poster with those statements at our desk. We're encouraged to live and breathe our purpose and mission in every day. I'm pretty new to the organization and I have to say that's something that this organization does very well. It's amazing what a difference that makes. I find the same thing with the Story Pirates. We do it differently. It is, none of us have a desk. I'm at my home and I'm at my desk. And we manage to do it in different ways, but it does make a huge difference in terms of buy-in for everyone to understand the value proposition. Recommendations on exercises or resources to help us clarify our target audiences. I'm going to get back to the longer answer of this in just a little bit. But the first thing is going to sound super simple. Make sure you're there when your audience is there. I don't know, Katie, forgive me if I don't remember what organization you're from. If you have a general public that is coming together, whether at your space or at your museum or at a theater, the first thing that starts with is being there. And it's something that I live far from Manhattan. I often don't want to come in because I just want to sit on the couch and watch bad reality TV at night when the shows are going on. But the truth is, the first way to understand your target audience is talking to them, and visiting and being there when you have something you're presenting and asking, how'd you hear about this? We're so glad to have you. I want to introduce myself. Is this your first show? We, other organizations, and this is something that you have to balance this in terms of the tone of your organization. When I was with the youth theater, what we were trying to determine this, because it was a little bit harder. It's some organizations you can really just look around the room and see that it is people of a certain age. You can make, unfortunately, some generalizations about some demographics. Working with a theater company for children, though, when I was with Tada Youth Theater, we actually did it by survey at the beginning of the show. Raise your hand if you've seen a show before, or if this is your very first time here, give me a cheer. And the house manager did this in a curtain speech and would actually make notes in our performance reports of, it seems like it was a pretty new audience, and so we did not all have to be there. We did it on a rotation that several of us would be in the lobby to talk about people, talk about them too after they walk away. Just kidding. To talk to people about why they came and to get to know them better. That answer your question, I hope? Yes. Oh, thank you. Yes, Katie, such a good question. Definitely start with the audiences who are already present. That is your target. Your most likely person to be able to, and we're going to talk about this a whole bunch. Actually, I'm going to pause right there, and I'm going to get back to that in 1 second, Katie, because I'm going to be able to answer that very soon. What are my thoughts about doing a formal market research study? I come from the for-profit sector. Aside from supporting nonprofits, as both a former agency owner with in-kind contributions, I'm new to the nonprofit world. I think it depends on how big an organization you are. If you are a really large art center and you have the budget to spare, sure. Most of the time it's not done in smaller arts organizations because the constituency is relatively small, and by doing a survey monkey or spending time in your lobby, really enlisting your house staff to find out more, you can find out, I would say, figure out about 75% of what a formal market research study would tell you. That's been my experience. I've specialized in really small nonprofits. The ROI on that would not have been worthwhile for our time. But yeah, if you're with a big organization and you can get real data on that, absolutely. I would love to have some of that data. Okay, I'm going to move on. I'm going to go back to answering Katie's question in just a minute. I think we're going to get there. So we're going to start with talking about data and sharing data. I am curious if you can tell me really quickly, how many of you only have one singular database for your organization that manages everything from fees to donors to gala attendees to vendors? I'm going to take a guess. I'm going to place a bet here. Can't pay you any money because I can't see you, but I'm going to put a philosophical bet in place that each of you has at least two. That you have oh heck no, 3. Katie, you're really fun. Huge pain point for us right now. Amen. Let me tell you, I'm going to tell you all the reasons why you should have your data in the same place. And then I'm going to turn off my computer and plan a gala that I'm planning for Story Pirates, where we're doing a show in Los Angeles where we are selling it through Ticketmaster. Not only will it be now the 4th system that we have data, I get no access to the data. I got nothing. These people are going to come. I'm hoping they're going to make a donation. I do not know their name. I don't know their cell phone number. We can't even get that information. So I am giving you my best practices. I'm not necessarily giving you my actual practices, unfortunately. So let's move on to my next slide over here. So after consistent messaging, and you guys already know this, I can see by the frowny faces in the messaging here, shared data is the next most important tool in collaborating between marketing and development. So I'm going to give you a hypothetical. Imagine this. On the night you presented your very first show, a young couple happened upon it on their very first date. The event was free, so they didn't pay a dime. They don't live at a fancy address. They don't even live in your city. They're not important, right? I know you're already going, no, they are important. Of course they're important. I know what you're leading that to. It's okay. Now imagine that years go by and he gets an entry-level job in your city and he misses her so whenever he can find a dime, he checks out one of your shows and reports back to her over long-distance phone calls. 2 years later, she's in for a visit, and he proposes over dinner and surprises her by taking her to one of your shows, which has now become a tradition for the two of them. He quickly gets promoted, and they move to a fancy address in your city. He still takes his wife to the first preview of every show you present, and now starts a new tradition of taking his daughter to closing night. You have become part of their family. You'd want to know that, right? You don't have to write me back. Of course you want to know that. Now, perhaps you'll hear their story along the way. If they are, you know, outgoing people and they like to chat, when you go and you get to know your audience by hanging out in the lobby, maybe you'll hear the story. It's one reason to go and hang out in the lobby. But perhaps they're shy, and this is not something they want to share. They don't necessarily, you know, think that you would even care. It may not occur to them. But if you attract your constituency from the very first day, and it lived in a database with not just clean current data, but a clean set of historical records that are shared by the box office and the marketing team and the development officers, you would at least, whether or not you knew to look for it, you would at least have enough data to know that you should get to know this patron better. It should be a goal that every patron goes from a visiting ticket buyer, a paying audience member of some kind, to becoming, or a volunteer, to becoming a member or a subscriber, if you have that type of program, to becoming a donor, to becoming a board member of your organization. It's not going to happen with 99% of the people who walk through your doors, but for a certain few, it should. And every patron should be treated and tracked like that is the goal for that patron. And the only way that it will be true for patrons is if you track them and know their relationship with the company so that you can cultivate it. There's a small university in New Jersey, where I am currently, that had a donor who was giving $50 a year in his annual gift. For years, decades and decades and decades. And, you know, they knew who he was generally. You know, they would switch databases, and then, you know, it always gets to push comes to shove, and you have to just, you know, launch the new database, and you say, fine, forget it. We're not gonna take all of that historical records. Those things were 10 years old. We're not gonna use them. This donor, when they passed away, bequeathed over $1 billion to the university. Gave $50 a year and bequeathed over $1 billion. Now, how do you track that? Who knows, right? Because that's, I mean, it's one in a billion, literally. But it is about having that history, that then when you go back and look, okay, this person, let's assume this person passed away in their 70s. You now have 70 years of $50. That's a lot. That's not nothing. And typically we, as development officers, we look at who's giving 500, who went from 400 to 500. We're not necessarily looking at continuity for the smaller numbers, because, you know, we know our ROI, we know to dismiss them. But if we have it at our fingertips, if we can just run a really quick query to say, who was consistently donated over, you know, an extraordinary period of time, maybe you can find something different. You know, you can find a different piece of information. So I know, preaching to the choir, that you want that database all in one place. The other piece of that is you want to analyze data in newer and more interesting ways. Don't just use the reports, that Libont report that is a canned report from, you know, that comes out of the box. There are other ways to look for that data. And whenever I'm hiring someone who's going to be my data manager, who you're never gonna, you know, unless you're with a huge organization, you're rarely gonna call that person next. They're gonna have 7 other jobs to do, right? But I actively seek individuals on my staff who have a real curiosity about data. Because if they do, and they're not afraid of a database, and so often, especially if they're not trained in data, everyone's afraid because, you know, 10 years ago, so-and-so erased all of the information from the database. people are scared to use it, right? And are scared to dig in. Be curious about your data. Make sure and work together. If there is an anomaly, like someone's been giving $50, you know, every year for decades, or there's someone who has come to the first performance of every show you have done for years, those are those things that you should really note between the two different departments. All right, moving right along here. The other thing to remember is that every patron is a potential donor because they have already showed interest in your company, which is going back to the question of who is, you know, who's your target audience? Is it aspirational or is it current? It's always going to start with current. Your shortest route to receiving, you know, to obtaining new fans of your organization is starting with the people who are already fans of your organization. And the other thing is they've already given you money. And that is telling. We vote with our time, we vote with our wallet, right? So if they have done those two things, you already know a great deal about them. You know that they're interested. So how do you turn them into donors? Of course, you're here, you're sitting in this webinar, you know that you need to work together. The way you're doing that is by making them aware that the organization needs donors and why. So unlike typical charities, nonprofit organizations often are not as immediately recognized as being worthy of donated funds. Now, we know that we're worthy, right? Like we can explain that to ourselves. We wouldn't be sitting here if we didn't get it. But it does take another hurdle because we have this additional task of educating our audiences. So this is another place where marketing and development departments can really work together to illustrate how much how much a ticket price actually covers, or what the organization can do if they received an extra $5 or $50 or $5,000 from one of your patrons. Also in terms of education, whether it's on your website or it's in your curtain speech or it's in that conversation that you're having with your patrons in the lobby, the explanation of why don't we run like a commercial arts organization when sometimes we seem really, really similar. You know, when you're having a hit, when people are banging down the doors to get into your organization and see your art, it's hard to see that you are that you're a nonprofit and that you are in need when they waited months to come in. They're not noticing the shows that they never bothered to see where you are trying to get an audience. And I do really strongly encourage including those in your marketing materials, finding ways to, with a postcard, having it be part of, you know, right after that value proposition, talking about how your organization is solving a societal problem and making the world a better place. Any questions on that? How soon is too soon? I'm not sure what context we're talking about in terms of making an ask. So you should be doing it at the time that they purchase their tickets, before they've even entered your door. They'll probably ignore it the first time, but you are starting that education right away. So if you are charging $45 for a ticket, they're buying it on your website, have a mechanism on your website asking, would you like to round up to $5? And like a 2-sentence explanation of, here's what we're going to do with that $5. Here's why we need $5. And it is widely understood now, and this is the reason why supermarkets do this, and drugstores do this, where the March of Dimes says, just for for $5 more, would you like to put your name on this little placard that goes, this paper thing that goes on the wall? Most people don't mind rounding up. If they aren't rounding up, at least they know that you're asking. It's going to give them pause for a half a second to say, oh, I wonder why they asked me for a donation. I guess they must be a nonprofit organization. It'll register somewhere in their head so that the next time you ask, you have the opportunity to explain it even further, but it's not brand new to them. The rule of thumb is You should thank a donor 7 times before you ask again. I don't know a single organization that does that. I really wish we did. We need to be better about doing it. But we're, you know, if you're doing a lot of shows, you're doing a lot of marketing on social media, you know, we're constantly, here's my handout. Can I have some more? Buy this, come see this, like this, you know, etc. But find ways to say, I appreciate you being here. And you can do it in ways, you know, in creative ways. Sometimes it is that current speech. Sometimes it is on social media. We just want to thank, you know, we want to thank you for being a fan of our organization. All right, let me look at time here. I'm doing okay. So just a couple points I wanted to make before I conclude. It looks like most of you are leaders of your organization, and I think it's really important that leadership makes it clear that fundraising is a responsibility of the entire staff and the board, no matter what their title is. When you as a leader of the organization don't make that clear or explain how to go about doing that, the onus falls on the marketing and the development departments to lead the charge. Now, when there's one of you that you're just wearing lots of different hats and trying to make it work, there is a challenge. You know, you lead from the top, right? And you set examples from the top. The other piece of this is, you know, for me, I'm never more inspired to do my job as the director of development for Story Pirates, and really with all of my clients. And I get this opportunity a lot, where I get the opportunity to listen to the founder of Story Pirates talk about how his goal is simply to blow kids' minds. It gets me every single time. I mean, I've done the reading. I've written the grants to tell any number of different organizations or individuals why they should give us anywhere from $500 to $500,000. But hearing him once again and he's amazing at it, he finds new words to explain how arts and literacy brought him out of selective mutism as a child. It never fails to tug at my heart and remind me why we do what we do. And it's that emotional connection that I get as the person who is sitting in on these, you know, on these meetings where we're asking for $500,000. I get access to that on a semi-regular basis, and it makes it that much easier for me to do my job. But the rest of my colleagues in any organization I've ever been with, they don't get to sit at those meetings with a board prospect. So their reminder of why we do what we do, it comes farther and fewer between. And so it's no wonder that the part-time marketing assistant isn't thinking of doing anything more for the company than what is explicitly written in their job description. So to solve that, I really think it's imperative that staff and board build time in their very busy schedules to see the art in action. It's an expectation that should be out there from the very beginning. They should be given unlimited access to see what you do and to take the time to talk to guests and learn firsthand how you affect your public. And in return, every one of them should be expected, in fact, in their job description, to advocate for the company. So in conclusion, arts management it's an extremely fine line between business and art. It requires you to be passionate about things that don't help the bottom line, yet forces you to find money where money should not exist. It's this tightrope that I have, to be honest, seen balanced poorly far more often than well. And in being here and in caring enough about the arts to learn how to fund it and market it and manage it administratively better, you're the next generation that can do better. And so for that, I commend you all and I thank you for being here. So that brings me to questions. Welcome, Katie. Thank you. Oh, there's a long one here. Okay, hold on. Let me scroll up. I'm going to read Katie's question to everyone. I don't know how well you guys can see this. We've been on the long haul model. I'm not familiar with her, which also strongly advocates for the integration between marketing and development. But that model also waiting. The right time to ask will result. Okay, I hear what you're saying, and I don't disagree. The right time to ask is true when you're asking for a major gift. You want to set yourself up for, if you're asking someone for $20,000, something that's going to really stretch them, you want to feel pretty confident that they're going to say yes. It's the only question that is easier than asking someone to marry you, right? Because you want to feel pretty confident that they're going to say yes. But when you're asking them for a small donation, you're asking them to move from being a single ticket buyer, a patron, a low-level patron, into your donor pool, small into your donor pool, then that's actually nowhere near as hard of an ask. In fact, it's an ask you should do regularly, because then you, from that information, knowing when they went from patron to donor, at what level did they become a donor? Did they give $5 or did they give $5,000, where you go, whoa, and you get those emails and it's like, hey, who did this? I don't even know who this person is. Let's go research them. Thank you for sharing that. So that's when, if someone who on a first appeal gives you $5,000, that's when you put them in a totally different category, that they're your major gift prospects, which is, a whole workshop for another day. And it looks like you're on the right track for that. But for your lower level donors, so the people you're just trying to get onto that continuum, it isn't too early to ask, in my opinion. Any other questions?
Amy, I actually wanted to ask, since we spent some time talking about sharing data and databases, that, there might be folks on the line or folks who come on and view the recording that are just working off of spreadsheets, because some places are still like that, And so I'm wondering if you have any suggestions about, like, really straightforward, are there specific databases that you recommend and why? Or if you're a small arts organization who is ready to make the leap into a database, how you would recommend that they start that research for them?
So the first thing that I'm going to say is there is no perfect database. They don't exist. You will find a database. You will love everything about it. You will spend way too much time setting it up for your organization. And then within a month, you will find all of the problems with it. I have never seen it work any other way, unfortunately. Knowing that, what I would actually recommend is a database that is with a company that is not going to go anywhere, that is really going to continue to grow, and that has third-party apps that are regularly changing, so that all of your data is living in one place. So you're not worried about, if you decide, I hate this ticketing software, or I don't like the email mechanism that we're using, you can get rid of that without losing that, John Smith has been with you for, 70 years and is going to make that bequeathment of $5 million, right? Salesforce is probably the one that I'm recommending the most right now. It's free. I say that and I laugh, because there is an out-of-the-box free nonprofit pack that is much better than it was. But you then still need to customize it for your organization and put a whole lot of third-party apps on it. So free somehow turns into, tens of thousands of dollars really quickly. There are others that are, one organization I'm working with uses Kindful, which is, just sort of your most basic, it's one of those things. Again, you'll love it at first, and then you'll realize really quickly, oh, it doesn't do any of these 20 things that I was hoping it would do. I'm also a big believer, whatever database you use, it is only as good as the data that you put into it, and the quality of the users, of the knowledge of the users that are using it. But if you can get yourself off a spreadsheet, force yourself, almost like, like going cold turkey on an addiction, try to get yourself off of spreadsheets, because, and use your data, manipulate your data in your database, because otherwise it gets so easy to say, oh, it seems like so much work to just compare this data to something else. We'll do it next year. And I would imagine that most of the organizations that are on the chat right now, and that, that are, every organization I have been with has done that for years. you know, that there's like this 7-year black hole of data because it was, oh, nobody knows how to use this database. It's a wasteland. Let's pull it all out and use spreadsheets. Any other questions? All right, well then I think we're at 4 o'clock on the East Coast right here. The sun is going to start setting. I think that we've hit the end.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Amy, and thank you to everyone who attended today's webinar, Marketing and Development, Beautiful Together. Thank you for participating in our conversation, and I hope you were able to take a lot away from today's presentation. A reminder that this event was recorded, and it will be available for replay in about 24 hours. You can visit us at artsu.americansforthearts.org for other training opportunities and resources. And as I mentioned before, I will upload the PowerPoint slide deck as well, so that way you have that too.
And
Thank you
Marissa,
again.
if anyone wants to be in touch, please share my contact information as well. I'd be happy to answer any further questions offline.
Excellent. So you can email me at artsu@artsusa.org. I'll put that in the chat box, and I'll forward your questions over to Amy. So Thank you so much again, everyone, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.